Welcome to Elevate, the podcast where we dissect exceptional achievers who are consistently raising the bar personally and professionally to produce extraordinary results in investment real estate and ultimately in their lives. Now here's your host, Tyler Chesser.
Elevate Nation, welcome back. This is Tyler Chesser. I'm so thankful to have you here, and I am absolutely blessed and grateful to be here with one of my very best friends in the entire planet.
Bless up.
Rob Giltner. Rob, my friend, how are you?
Doing very good. Very excited. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Long time, first time.
That's right.
Yeah.
One of the, I actually thought about this. We should have done the layup lines before we got started here. So just to give Elevate Nation a little bit of an insight into Rob and I's past in college, whenever we would we'd go to a party or we'd go to a friend's house, you know, we'd introduce each other as Rob Giltner, standing at a staggering, what are you, 6'2"? What are you,
6'7" now.
Okay, 6'7". Yeah, it's 232 pounds of pure muscle and steel. So that's just a little bit of insight here. We have a lot of fun, but this is going to be a little bit of a special edition of the podcast today because we're going to do a little bit of a longer form than we normally do, and we're going to try to go deep today. The reason why we're doing that is because Rob and I have amazing conversations. We have conversations that need to be recorded 90% of the time, and they take turns and, you know, kind of peaks and valleys through some different discussions here. So we're going to talk a lot about psychology. We're going to talk a lot about mindfulness. We're going to talk a lot about relationships. We're also going to have a lot of fun. So I hope that Elevate Nation enjoys this, and I hope you're up to do that.
Very much, man. Yeah.
All right, man.
Let's get it going.
So Elevate Nation, welcome back. Are you ready to take it to another level? Because I know that I am. I want to welcome you back to the show where our mission is to identify and apply how the best of the best raise the bar personally and professionally to achieve greatness in real estate and beyond. And, you know, this is where you learn the mindset, the habits, the routines, the systems, the tools, the strategies, and so much more from those who are elevating to a life without limits so you can do the same yourself. And I also want to remind you that this is a masterclass for leaders and those looking to achieve uncommon results and purposeful outcomes through real estate investing and ultimately in their lives. And a little bit of housekeeping, of course. If you're appreciating what we're doing, we would certainly appreciate if you subscribe to the show, if you gave us a rating, a review. Certainly helps. Our goal is to reach millions and millions of people with this message because we believe that you don't just have to tolerate your life. You don't just have to plug it in. You don't have to dread, you know, Monday. You don't have to have the Sunday scaries. And I think that anything's possible. And so, you know, with that said, I want to introduce you to Rob Giltner, as I mentioned here. So Rob was born and raised here in Louisville, Kentucky, and early in life, he valued all types of relationships and the well-being of people. That value influenced him to pursue a master's degree in the psychotherapy field with an influence in systematic therapy. After graduating from Louisville Seminary, he worked a year in substance abuse facility working with their intensive outpatient program before moving to private practice. So in 2019, he moved practices to the Louisville Mindfulness Center, where he currently practices. And in his role as a therapist, educator, and coach, so he can be any of the three, he uses these roles to create change, healing, or growth. Using evidence-based practices, clients and he work in a strategic way that incorporates the client's strengths along with therapeutic interventions. This is a mouthful here. He works with individuals and couples who are experiencing, but not limited to, addiction, trauma, emotional and mental wounds, relational issues, life transitions, closeness and intimacy problems, grief and loss, so on and so forth. I mean, things that we all deal with in life, right? And so the reason why Rob is on the show, number one, is because of my boy. Number two is because we all deal with this stuff. We all deal with our own internal, you know, kind of distress, our own internal dialogue, as well as like to elevate to a life without limits. You can't do it alone. And you have to do it with other people. You have to incorporate other people. Why one of the questions that I ask so many people is, how do you elevate, you know, others around you? It's about those relationships. And so I really want to dive deep into this today with you and have some fun. Yeah. And with that said, I'd love to know if you could, you know, tell Elevate Nation more about Rob, the man behind the bio.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I know that's a mouthful. Has a hard time combining or, you know, putting all that into a brief little bio. But I guess what I want Elevate Nation to know, and the type of work that I do, is I see individuals, families, and couples and adolescents, like it said on the bio, to help them be the best version of themselves. And sometimes that's through change. Sometimes that's through healing, because there's those emotional wounds. And non-pathologizing. So we're not just saying this is what you have, because we do diagnose, but more of a medical model. So just like if someone would go to a doctor for a broken hand or an illness, if it's a mental illness or emotional illness, we treat that. And so that's the real focus of medical model of, how can I help and contribute any way to someone's life? So that's the real motivator. And without getting into too much of clinical terms, it's basically what I do or try to do.
So tell me a little bit more about, like, why did that sort of career path or professional path intrigue you? And what sort of takeaways do you have by contributing in that way?
Well, so relationships, which, we've talked about off air a little bit, is extremely important to me. I remember as a kid valuing that very much so, valuing the relationship I had with my parents, my friends and family. And then when the relationships weren't as great, remembering, gosh, how that felt, and not avoiding that pain, if it was pain, but sitting with it and say, gosh, okay, I value this. That's, kind of, not to toot my own horn, I thought I was a little mindful early on. But then growing and kind of meeting people like you at school. My favorite story about Tyler, when we first met, is my first vision of Tyler is standing on a chair or table in a room and just commanding the room. And I was like, that's the type of guy I want to be friends with. And
awesome.
Here we are today. And so those really, I really value, and it's so important to me. And now I get super psyched, because what neuroscience is showing is that value actually is food for the mind. It grows so many different things, fires neurons, grows these things called myelin, and it's just awesome. So yeah, that's kind of the importance I place on relationships and why.
That's amazing. And I want to go into the neuroscience there if possible. I mean, maybe we go off track a little bit.
Yeah,
there,
we'll probably go around.
But I want to know more about that. But then you talked about how you valued relationships. You noticed so early how you valued relationships mindfully. So can you describe, like, what it means to value a relationship mindfully versus, maybe after the fact, I recognize that person was important to me, because, like, honestly, you were the person who showed me mindfulness years ago. I mean, it was probably a decade ago, and it sounds weird. It's a buzzword nowadays, but does that question make sense? I mean,
it does. And so, mindfulness and relationships, have they incorporate each other very well. And, part of mindfulness is incorporating it within relationships. But at a younger age, and I don't know why, or maybe it's because it gave me energy, like relationships I have with you and others, it does now. So it gives me energy. I kind of thrive off it. And I can't really remember if that was the case, growing up, but for whatever reason I just cherished it. And I remember I changed schools. My parents separated, and there was this really close friend I had from grades 1st through 5th grade. And then I go to 6th, 7th, and 8th, and I'm in change schools. I'm in a different city. And I remember calling him and say, hey, it's Rob. I miss you. I've been thinking about you. And the guy's like, who? Even though we spend each other at each other's house. And that showed me that, gosh, maybe everybody doesn't hold true to these relationships kind of like I do. And the funny thing is that relationships aren't just within humans and within friends or family or romantically, that we have to have, and we do have, strong relationships with higher power or nature and music, with our career. It kind of goes on, and a lot of people aren't mindful to be aware of that. And so if you're not mindful of the different types of relationships you have, then you're kind of oblivious and very vulnerable to negative behaviors and patterns. So for example, if I value nature, and let's say I value being around water, like we were at the lake, this past summer, and that was an awesome experience, and I felt energized afterward. on top of vertigo. That boat.
Yeah, exactly.
But if I'm not aware,
wait, you're still not shaking? Like,
yeah,
okay, wait.
shaking,
all right, so it's
right
1
now.
year later, I might be all right.
So so if I wasn't aware that I have this strong relationship to water and I never go around it, I'm going to experience things that I would experience if your and I's relationship starts to get rocky. I'll miss you and I won't know why. Maybe then I'm sad, and then a secondary emotion maybe comes. I'm depressed or I'm angry and I don't know why. And a lot of people come to me in session to say, God, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. And we look back and maybe it is something from one of those relationships. And so that's where kind of mindfulness come in. And I know I'm giving you a mouthful, but the big mindfulness piece is a thing called mind mapping, which is basically emotional intelligence. So being mindful within a relationship is me trying to understand you and making a map of your mind. So what are you experiencing right now? What are you possibly thinking and feeling? And based off data you give me, then I just kind of keep making a trail, keep making a map. And that is empathy, basically. And if we don't do that, if we're not mindful of our partner or of our friend or whoever relationship we are, then it gets rocky and the relationship isn't as stable as we want it to be. And we know what happens when relationships aren't stable.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot there, and mind mapping to me is so fascinating because in my opinion, and you can tell me if I'm wrong from your, much more advanced perspective of this thought, is it's really all about perspective, right? It's about, hey, what's going on in the other person's mind? I was talking to, a colleague of mine actually today about just writing emails, as simple as it is. It's like, you've got to think about, well, what is this person's perspective? How many other emails are they getting today? How many other texts are they getting today? Whatever it may be, calls, are they bombarded by other messages? Do they fully understand our perspective? Or, are we assuming that they do? And I just find it fascinating. I do think it makes a lot of sense for people to kind of slow down and say, hey, you know what's going on in this person's world? And I'm talking about it from more of a business perspective, but I think business is all about personal relationships. So, is that what you're saying? It's more like kind of perspective on others?
Very, very much. Every person that you interact with has a subject reality that they're experiencing. And we can get caught in maybe kind of coming off too brash or harsh, or maybe something we do that it's not intentional triggers somebody and they get defensive or they shut down or stonewall or something like that. All comes from we're just having two different realities from the same stimuli, like an email. There's two different subject realities, and mind mapping helps you understand or attempt to, and then communicate your understanding of that person's reality. Yeah, that's a form of mind mapping.
So can you talk to us a little bit? So like in a communication, so like you and I were sitting here right in front of each other. What's a practical way that someone can mind map? Is it to ask better questions? Is it to read body language? Is it to, see how far, how fast their breath is going? Like what would you say?
Yeah, well, the first thing, if people, whether it's romantically or it's business or it's just friendship, if there's a problem or just a form of communication, people look for a solution way too quick. And so what you want is to get more information. And so there's questions you want to ask, and you want to search, and I'll play like reporter to the individual. And if the individual is not there, and so if you're doing it over email and you can't ask questions back and forth, language and how John Gottman, I'm a big fan of, talks about a gentle startup. How do you do a gentle startup that is very mindful of the place where you might believe the other perspective is to the receiver of your message?
So talk to me more about like what you've learned from John Gottman, because I read a book by him recently that was the 7 principles of making marriage work. Because I'm getting married in like 4 months, and you just got married, so you're telling me all the wisdom there, but I learned a lot about, like, you mentioned stonewalling earlier, and like the harsh startup and those kind of things. Like, can you go into depth on that? Because it seems like that's a little bit of a cornerstone of really how to develop the right relationships, how to develop strong, lasting relationships, which real estate's all about, but then also life is all about.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, that's why I love John Gottman's work, and his wife Julie. because it can be used, it's very versatile, whether it's romantically or career-wise. And gosh, even with yourself, your relationship with yourself, it's super important.
Yeah.
But just quick backstory, John Gottman was actually a scientist who studied relationships, called this thing the Love Lab. And I think was like 20 years plus. And he studied these couples, and he's the first one to do it. You know, a lot of couples therapy and things like that, it was all based on theory, and John Gottman made it into a science, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
But he kind of has all this data as a scientist, but there's 4 things that he can actually predict in the high 90s that it's in a relationship, whether romantic or things like that, that if these behaviors continue, it's the end. He calls it the 4 horsemen. And that is contempt, criticism, stonewalling, and defensiveness. And so those type of 4 things, if they exist and you don't offer antidotes to them, they'll continue and the relationship will fail. The big things that I love about John Gottman that goes into deeper, a little more depth, is that there's these ideas that behind any sort of conflict, and conflict can range from a high argument to just asking, what are we eating for dinner today? And I don't know, do you know? We all get in that.
Yeah.
But behind each argument, there's these things called dreams within conflict. And how I relate them to is that each person has a garden, and in that garden are seeds. And the seeds are dreams, which dreams can be hopes, fears, wants, needs, emotional wounds, unrecognized behavior. Like a dream could be, I need a sense of freedom, or maybe it's events related to inclusion or exclusion. Like I felt like my boss didn't hear me, or I felt like I didn't have any power in the conversation, or I didn't have any influence. All those can be little seeds. And what we do is we tend to communicate about a presenting problem. So let's say one seed grows a root, and we try to fix that root, and we cut it off, we pull the root out, but the seed's still there. And so are all these other ones, and they work together to mess up this garden. And so Gottman talks about is, let's not solve the problem at hand, but let's find all this other information, these seeds, and uncover them. And once you take the seed out of the garden, those seeds don't grow weeds, and it's not unhealthy. And maybe then it's replaced with fruit and vegetables and all the great stuff.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, and one of the things that it reminds me of, 2 things. Number one, you were talking about the little argument. I had to go back to this. You were talking about the little argument. What are we going to have for dinner tonight? I don't know. What do you think? And I just want to make a mention real quick. Don't ever mess with Rob Giltner's dinner, because he loves to eat. And, you definitely share that.
Big eaters.
Yeah, he's a big eater. So
don't give me to the White House.
Don't let this this intellectual core really kind of mask the fact that this guy can throw down on some food.
Yeah.
All right. So that's number 1. But number 2,
that's
actually, that's it. And then thank you for tuning in today.
See you next time.
No, the biggest thing, actually, the fact that you said is really about the little things, right? That's one of the things that stood out to me, is like to develop a strong relationship with someone over time. It is about the little things.
Yeah.
So it's about turning to your partner, to your, whoever this is that you're building a relationship with. John Gottman talks about your primary relationship mostly, but it applies otherwise.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I feel like I learned was, it's about the little things. It's about, hey, what's going on in your day today? What challenges are you dealing with? And then being aware of those things and like having that map of the other person's kind of life outside of just your relationship. Yeah. Sharing those experiences. I mean, what else would you say on that thought? I mean, is there anything else in terms of just building those kind of small, little details and sort of building that relationship that can stand the test of time and the challenges?
Very much so. And he gives a concept called an emotional bank account, where you make deposits and withdrawals. And that bank account I use, whether it's relationship with an individual. So like Tyler, you have a relationship with Tyler, and I have a relationship with myself. Again, I keep saying this over and over, but could be used in any type of relationship. But that emotional bank account where you make deposits and withdrawals, and he talks about, through his research, there's a ratio of 5 deposits to 1 withdrawal. And those little moments where you can either turn toward, which you just talked about, or turn away, can be deposits, and those add up over time. And they add up in forms of, it builds trust. He talks about building trust isn't by telling the truth over and over again. It's in those little moments. He calls them sliding door moments, off this really old movie. But we have the ability to turn toward your partner, your family member, your friend, or turn away. And you want an example?
Yeah.
You want to? So
come on, man. Are you serious?
Well,
Let's do this.
He gives a great example, and I'm going to steal it from him. Is that if my wife is in let's say the bathroom and the door's open, I could see her, and she has a tear in her eye. But let's say I'm reading a book and I'm really into it. It's the last chapter. It's, great information. I have an opportunity right there to turn toward her. And that is, hey, I'm going to mind map. Hey, what's going on? I know you had a hard day today. Are you okay? What are you feeling? What are you going through? Or I can act like I didn't see it and go read the book. And by turning toward, what that does is leave a little deposit to her that says, okay, Rob's going to be there for me.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to understand me. He's
not
going to
have to ask him.
I'm not going to have to ask him. Yeah. And so that builds trust. You're going to have my back. Those little moments are key. And another Gottman tool, he calls the masters of relationships do that versus the disasters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated by this is obviously I'm getting married soon. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people, they have this desire for the perfect relationship or whatever it may be. And it seems like that's, number one, that's not a realistic expectation. It's never going to be perfect. But then also to create a life where, anything is possible, I think it's, perhaps, something that you want to invest so much time and energy into, not only just because love is one of the greatest experiences of life. Maybe it is the greatest experience of life. But what else is everything worth if you're not going to have that? So, and also I think you can do so much more when you have a partner who supports you.
Very much so. Yeah.
Are you someone who is looking to seriously elevate your life this year? I mean, now, this year, 2020, because I want to let you know that I am currently opening up a few coaching spots for people like you who want to close the gap from where you are to where you want to be. And I want to invite you to visit coachwithtyler.com. Again, that's coachwithtyler.com. I have to tell you, this is not for everyone. This is only for those who are defiantly committed, those who are decisive, those who are coachable, those who are resourceful. They're willing to do whatever it takes. They're willing to sacrifice time, energy, and invest resources into themselves to get to where they want to be, to live life at the highest level, and to elevate to a life without limits, exactly what we talk about on this show. If that is you, I invite you to visit coachwithtyler.com. Again, that's coachwithtyler.com.
I love it. So I want to talk, there's so many different things I want to cover today, but one of the things that you mentioned was emotional intelligence. I read a book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, a year or so ago, which many of our listeners may have read. But I love to kind of just dive into that a little bit. What, I guess, overall, how would you define emotional intelligence?
So, and I use the mind mapping example, and that's Daniel Siegel, who, I really love. And the reason I like that is because it's backed by neuroscience. They studied the brain, because a lot of, and it could be wrong or right, because it turns out a lot of theorists who do write books, turns out they're right because it is backed by neuroscience, and maybe some not. But when it's just up to theory, it leaves the risk of the author having transference or countertransference. So some information might not all be accurate. So that's why I like the neuroscience stuff. But the mindsight is an ability to shape and see your mind and others. And that is emotional intelligence. Me to see your mind, not your brain. The brain and mind are very different. The mind is an embodied and relational process that regulates the flow of energy. And energy, and you're big into this, and energy, not like, I get up and I eat something, it turns to energy. That's more of the brain helps function that. Energy, like actual electrical energy. We together, I think we get together and we feed off our energy.
Oh, yeah.
The mind is the one that regulates that. And you think of a car that, okay, I have to have the capacity to see what I'm driving. So that's seeing the mind. I have the capacity to see that. And then to shape it, that's turning the wheel. So that's what we want to have the emotional intelligence with ourselves or others, that the capacity to say, okay, I have to see what I'm regulating, which is the car, and then I can able to shape it. And so I don't know if that is very understandable, if that makes sense, and I can maybe offer some examples, but that's how I see emotional intelligence.
Yeah, give me one example, and I do have a follow-up just concept over top of this that I want to dive into. Give me an example of what you mean by that.
So emotional intelligence. So one thing that happens all the time is because every human craves empathy, but very rarely do we give it a lot.
Yeah.
So there is an example where we went to
every human craves empathy.
Yes.
That's a soundbite that everybody
gets. Every human craves empathy because empathy does all these wonderful things in the brain that we'll talk about and in the mind.
Yep.
So one thing that emotional intelligence does through the mind mapping and the mindsight is we went to a college basketball game a few weeks ago.
Yep.
And I drove you.
Go Cats, by the way.
That's right.
Big Blue Nation.
You told me that, hey, can you drive because you're having tire problems and X, Y, Z. If you were to ask, hey, can you drive? One thing you're needing is the empathy and understanding for me to like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'll definitely drive.
Yeah.
So if you were to say, hey, can you drive? Emotional intelligence would be to the first thing, okay, there's a reason that you might need me to drive.
Yeah.
Not that, okay, Tyler's taking advantage of me, or no, I can't drive. I got to pay for gas. It's more of saying, okay, Tyler must be going through something or have an issue. So I'm mind mapping. I'm trying to see out your perspective and all possible perspectives.
Yeah.
And that is emotional intelligence. And so what happens is we don't trust a lot of people to have emotional intelligence because not everyone does. So then you have to add, can you drive? Period. Now add, because my car is having troubles.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. And obviously I was there. I remember that, that moment, but I think we can all recognize times where we would hope that others would just give us some empathy and just, you know what, do I really have to explain this? Or can you just trust that I'm, I'm not trying to take advantage of you or whatever it is. But in my opinion, I think it goes back to a little bit of mindfulness, right? To recognize that the world doesn't always just revolve around ourselves and that there's other factors at play here. And I want to kind of dive in a little bit, and I appreciate you talking about emotional intelligence. The reason why I brought that up is because I think to build relationships, you have to be emotionally intelligent because humans are emotional beings. Like we're all experiencing different emotions at any given time.
Right.
There's fear, there's worry, there's anxiety, there's happiness, there's joy, there's inspiration. We could be feeling these things simultaneously, which is why I wanted to kind of shift slightly and just talk about mindfulness and how do we coexist with all of these different things at play at once. I mean, like our minds are crazy. Yeah.
And I appreciate you saying that, when we want to build relationships, you have to have the emotional intelligence because I think a lot of people out there can have difficulty building relationships.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't have a lot of friends, or I want to develop more, and this is the way to do it. And Einstein, this is the whole mindfulness thing and the emotional intelligence piece, but Einstein talks about we have this delusion of separateness, so that we're all different from one each other, and mindfulness helps with the mindfulness reflection helps dissolve that delusion. So we're actually connected. So because we crave empathy, then we have to all be connected. So if, I think of a community like Louisville, which we're in, when we're all connected and we're all seeing ourselves as connected, then we're more likely to be empathetic, and then we're more likely to have understanding. And then we build, things happen in the brain. We build resiliency as us individuals, but also as a community. And that's cool to think that emotional intelligence and mindfulness can build resiliency within a community. Dan Siegel also, and this is on mindfulness subject, he did this work at a concentration camp and found that these guards in this horrible concentration camps would mass murder, and then they would leave their work and go home and be really nice and playful with their dogs and their children. And so what he's found through this data is people can actually turn off their emotional intelligence or their mindsight. And so they can become oblivious and not mindful at all. And it usually happens when we think we're different than another person. So it's easy to be mindful and be empathetic. And the brain has two circuits, one of the physical world and one of the mind type of world. And those circuits of compassion and kindness tick on because I mind map you, I'm mindful, mindful equals emotional intelligence, all that happens. But we can also turn it off when we think, I'm uncomfortable because I don't know this person, or if it's a different culture or religion, or we see it all the time in politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that Daniel Siegel, Daniel Siegel, so he wrote a book called Mindsight, which Rob put me on, and I read it, and I was like, man, this is like one of the most amazing books I ever read. So I highly recommend that everybody takes a look at that book, as well as the other books that we've already mentioned. But one of the things that he talks about is that you can actually have, kind of multiple personalities, right? Or you can compartmentalize like certain, just ways of being in certain situations. Otherwise, I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the same thing, it kind of is on the subject of how you can kind of turn it off and turn it on. Basically, your empathy and your emotional intelligence, which is scary. And again, all comes back to if I feel connected to some person or not. But the idea of, we have these like different parts within us, and it all comes out with comfortability, basically. So if I'm around you, I am one way, and I like myself around you.
Yeah.
But if I'm around maybe a toxic relationship, or abusive relationship, which is toxic, I have to be someone completely different. And the tricky thing is that if I don't have good mindsight, I see myself more as the uncomfortable emotion because it's more powerful. So I start not to like myself, and I start to, hate myself, see the negative, have the negative perspective. And then this conscious, it turns into subconscious, starts to listen. So then, maybe I, am angry or depressed or have, a mental illness or something like that. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. And I wanted to take it another step further because you're really speaking to me, because of the fact that there's so many people out there, obviously, right? We all deal with so many different types of people. You're talking about toxic relationships, and maybe even not even to that extreme, but we were talking earlier about energy and how, like, when you and I spend time together, like, we know it's going to be a great time. We're going to vibrate at a high level. Yeah. We're going to have great thoughts. We're going to be really creative in our thinking. And
I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for you, but I like myself when I'm around you.
Right.
Because they're high energy and the vibrations are going. And got the positive vibrations.
Yeah, exactly. Good vibes. But it's a real thing. And then there's other times where you spend time with people and you can really feel kind of the lower level energy.
Right.
And if you really want to get woo woo and is really corny on the stuff, and I go there for sure. But you can feel this kind of low level energy, and that connection is off, and you don't really vibrate higher, and you don't really have creative thoughts, and you don't get excited. And it's hard to build a relationship in that circumstance.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, how do you not get caught in that downward spiral when I don't know if you know the answer to this, but like, I see this a lot where, like, man, if I'm with somebody who I'm like really like we're on the same wavelength, it's like, man, anything is possible.
Yeah.
And then there's other times where it's like, oh my gosh, it's like I'm trying to be mindful and recognize the fact that, you know what, this is happening, but you still get sucked into it. I mean, how does that? Is there any thoughts or tips that you would have for those types of circumstances?
Yeah, and first, it's what works for someone might not work for another person, but as a broad scheme, there is a way to kind of go about it. So you're kind of saying, if someone, either toxic or more of a drain, so one person, the type of person might really drain me is very, very negative.
Right.
And so, if I'm around that, and if it's not a client, because some clients come in and it's really negative, but when you're in my office, it's a medical model. So I don't see all that. My see is, okay, we're walking together to try to get you out of this tough place. Yeah. But if I'm at,
you're looking to serve people in that.
It's
you expect
a very different perspective.
To bring them. Yeah.
But if I'm out at a, like, what's something we do a lot?
I mean, we were at a basketball game.
Yeah. If I'm at a basketball, we were at a basketball game, and the people behind us, we're big Kentucky fans, but sometimes Kentucky fans can be crazy.
Oh yeah.
And so they're all saying all these negative stuff. Jeez. And let's say you weren't there because you kind of you helped me get some resiliency to that.
Yep.
But if I was there by myself, I would start getting codependent. And that is, I'm having loss of self because of these people's negativity.
Yeah.
So loss of self could be, maybe I lose sleep, but in that moment I didn't. So I lost the enjoyment of the game. So that's loss of self. So way do you get that back is one, to protect yourself, build boundaries. But one is to be mindful of that it's happening. And the big thing with mindfulness is not to judge your emotions or not to judge your thoughts, just observe them. So, okay, I'm starting to feel negative from the negativity around me. And like I would if I was going to lean back and look at the clouds are just going right on by. And so I'm not analyzing them. I'm not trying to solve them. I'm just observing my thoughts and feelings and almost welcoming those negative emotions like I would a friend. So, hey, negativity, or hey, stress, how are you doing? Good to see you, buddy. And you welcome it. And then after that, you kind of see it go away like a cloud. And your role with those thoughts and emotions is just to observe them.
It's super powerful. I mean, it's like, it's like one of the most useful practices like on the planet. I mean, because how many times in your day do you get irritated, you get annoyed, or you get, frustrated, or you get, stressed, or whatever it may be. And it's like your emotions are really just trying to keep you alive. Yeah. They're trying to pass on the gene.
Exactly. They're trying to support and help you. They're protecting you. Yeah. Even sadness, fear, all to protect you. But I just want to say one thing, because this is my therapy mode kicking in.
Keep doing it.
If someone's listening and they're in maybe a very toxic or abusive relationship, mindfulness isn't enough. You have to set boundaries, and those boundaries could be, what are ways that I can protect myself? So if I'm married to,
physically protect yourself.
And emotionally, because people can be emotionally abusive. So you'd have to set boundaries to have resiliency to them. And a lot of people say, gosh, I can't do that because maybe the abuser, responds with anger and they test the boundaries, or I'm more of a people person. And every time I say to that is, well, if you protect yourself, you're pleasing yourself. But I just want to say that the mindfulness and just observing, that is big. But if you're actually being abused anyway, the boundaries are key. So I just had to throw that out there.
If you are, we'll put links into the show notes of where you can where you can contact Rob. And actually, I'll just real quick, it's robgiltner.com is one way. But, you're talking about the mindfulness, and just like as the example at the basketball game, it's like, oh my gosh, like, what are you talking about? Like, this team is awesome. Like, this is so much fun. Like, we get to be here, and cheer on, a team that we love, and just enjoy life. And you have these negative comments, and, we get swept up in it too. It's like my heart starts racing.
Yeah. And you're like,
and then you start but then when you, I guess because of the practice, and when you train your mind to say, hey, you know what, I don't have to believe that, or I don't have to, step into that emotion, and just watching it and letting it. One thing that Tony Robbins talks about, and I probably say that every single show I do, this one thing that Tony Robbins talks about. He says that emotion lasts 90 seconds. Each emotion lasts 90 seconds. Is that something that you've recognized as well? Or?
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be 90 seconds because, actually it can be shorter or longer. But, that's a good point, because it depends on,
obviously you can get festered into it and it can last longer.
So let's say road rage is really bad, because that's something I remember so we went to school at U of L, and if anybody would come out and cause an inconvenience, you would lose it.
I have a little bit of road rage.
But I've driven with you now, and that doesn't happen.
Meditation.
I'll say it too. It's happened with me. It happened the other day on the way to work that, someone pulled out, ran a red light and then flicked me off like I was in the wrong, even though I was just going on a green light. And I was just stewing over. I was like, what type of person could this be? Why are they doing this? So what are they like? And I caught myself being like, oh my gosh, I am grabbed on to this emotion and just sat with it and just let it stew and marinate all over me. And man, it was gross. And so then I zoomed back even more and said, no, that's just an emotion, and I'm just going to let it go. And then it went back. And that's a skill people have to build. And sometimes you have to work at that. And one way to practice it, practice this mental and emotional hygiene, is to the mindfulness breathing. But I'm also very, very big on, like when we were at the lake, we did mindfulness where we were just mindful of all the sounds we heard around us. Yeah. And we were just focused on that. And if a thought or a daydream came in our mind, we were just aware of it, and we came back to what we were listening to. Yeah. And I do it a lot with visual stuff. So, you kind of play I Spy with yourself. Yeah. And you have a very wide perspective, and you're observing everything like I am in this room. And then you shrink in to this really nice microphone, and you're observing all that. And that can help build resiliency and keep those thoughts and feelings we don't want in the clouds and just letting them go by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things that really comes to mind when you describe that is just presence, right? Being present and like feeling like, you know, how do your hands feel together? You know, what's the sound or what's the smell of your breath? You know, like whatever that is. I mean, like your breath smells terrible.
That's right.
One of the things that I'm getting right now, but I'm really here.
But you're aware of it.
Yeah.
That's good.
So that's one of the
If you weren't mindful, you'd smell that
You
stinky
didn't wear
stuff.
deodorant. These are other things that are coming to mind, and it's just presence. It's mindfulness. So this is really how you get there. But really what we're talking about is like quality of life. Like, yes, you want to strive, you want to create more in your life, you want to create opportunities, you want to give back to other people, you want to be emotionally intelligent so you can build long-term relationships which then will lead to, you know, mutually beneficial relationships. But what we're talking about is like living today and having joy and having peace today, right? What do you say?
Yeah, I have this list that what mindfulness does.
Bring it.
And that what the daily hygiene, you know, we brush our teeth, and Dan Siegel calls it brain brushing, and that's the reflective practice of being aware of yourself and others. And what evidence has shown through his research and neuroscience has shown what it does. So tell me if you want these things.
All right.
If you want, you know, bodily understanding and healing. So actually meditation can actually lower hypertension, and it can help with this, you know, liver function and all these type of heart health, attuned to communication. So you're talking about the very beginning with the John Gottman stuff, how to properly communicate with, you know, people around us. Emotional balance is key, and emotional regulation, because I want to feel joy when something good is happening, but I also want to feel sad at times because sad helps you heal, but I don't want to have the mood swings and emotional imbalance, because I think we can all picture a time when we've had some emotional imbalance. Extension of fear. So it kind of builds, I keep saying resiliency, but it's such a big word, resiliency of fear. So it kind of lessens the effect and the power that fear has, mindfulness can. Flexibility of emotions. So again, I'm not just stuck in depression, or I'm not stuck with having anger issues. I can actually be flexible in the emotions, which I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to feel everything. Insight, which is very, very key. Empathy toward other people, that's awesome. Morality, so understanding that we're part of a larger whole. And happiness, all is proven that mindfulness can do. So just like the definition of the mind, it's an embodied and relational thing. So mindfulness helps the mind, the body, and our relationships. And what Dan Siegel then points out, within the brain, it grows amazing thing. It builds, you know, great, you know, neurons fire and wire together with mindfulness. You know, he has this hand model of the brain. So if here's the,
you gotta be watching on YouTube for this one.
Right hand. So my wrist is the spine, and the limbic part right here is the reptilian brain right here. And then there's a cortex come over, and those fingers right here are the prefrontal cortex, which handles all these things. And if you see, they touch everything. So it wraps around everything. And that's the part where we have the empathy. And what it does, where my fingernails are, it grows parts of the brain that allows us to be resilient, and allows us to have grit and strength, and allows us to be motivated to go through obstacles and not be stuck. So within the brain, mindfulness is shown to do those things. And it's just incredible, especially with children, really, because children's brains grow so fast.
That's one thing that I'm like super excited about having children in the future, is to teach them this, you know, from a young age. Can you imagine like having this type of understanding younger and then growing through your life with that? I mean, it'd be amazing.
And kids need that, because when the kids go to preschool, they learn about empathy. Goes, oh, this is why I need to share. This is why I need to pick up. This is why. But then when they hit kindergarten, another Siegel thing talks about this, they're hit with the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. And all. So
writing starts with an R. Wow. I didn't know. Okay. All right. That's good.
So did I say that right? What did I say? Reading?
Yeah.
No, I say, what's the 3 R's in elementary school?
Reading. I don't know. Rulers.
Rulers. Gosh, I'm gonna come back. So
rhombuses.
Reading, arithmetic, and there's another one.
We'll figure it out. We'll get there.
Writing sounds like an R.
Yeah.
R is silent. But what Siegel talks about is that you need to add on 3 R's, and that's reflection, resiliency, and relationship.
Yeah.
And that's
wow.
what kids really need on top of the other 3 R's.
And kids need it because humans need it. Like
Exactly.
adults need it.
Like humans crave empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can plant these things into your subconscious mind, which is what kids do when they're learning anything, because their brain waves are slower, and you can implant that into, the deep parts of their, psyche, or their central nervous system, which is really, if you want to learn something lasting, like, it needs to come through your nervous system.
Exactly.
Which is why I always say, share this with someone else and teach someone else and help someone else understand it, because that's how you start to act it out, like your body starts to anchor it in. So anyway, I just wanted to make a mention. People are like, why are you talking about kids? And like, we all love kids, but it's like, we were all kids at one point, right? You're trying to build a better humanity. It's like, you have to start there.
Yeah.
When you say?
Yeah, I would. And, there's one thing you pointed out that I just want to make sure is home's clear, is that being present with mindfulness. And so a lot of people think mindfulness is just clearing the mind, which is not it at all. It's being present and observing the mind.
Observing. You are not the mind.
Yeah. You are not your thoughts.
Yeah.
Your thoughts are just like weather clouds up there. And, a lot of them are, and you can't believe everything you think.
Yeah.
Some thoughts are great. Like, you're a wonderful leader, a great friend. Those are real thoughts. But what's not thoughts are the ones that might come in the middle of the night when we can't sleep. And those are just like weather clouds.
That's one of the hardest things for people to like grasp, is like, you're not the mind, because like no one ever, I mean, I don't know about you, but I never heard about any of this stuff until I was like, just probably a few years ago. And when someone would say, you're not the mind, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that makes no sense. What would you say to those who maybe aren't familiar with this concept, or can't fully kind of step around to the fact that this is true, or this is the case? I mean, you are not the mind. I mean, that's a weird concept, because it's like, how am I not the mind? Are you saying that me being is separate than this body or this physiology?
It's interesting. I won't share names.
We go deep on this one.
It can go deep, because I just had a client I saw today, who's a 13-year-old boy who is now having thoughts of ending his life and what's death like, and very, depressed. Do my parents love me? Am I a failure? And he is given these thoughts by a friend, or they're just coming to him like, weather clouds just show up, weather thoughts, we'll call them.
Yeah.
And then he's believing them as true. So he's grabbing them, holding them, dissecting them. And if you sit too long with it, it becomes your reality. So you start to believe them as fact. And that is where the mind kind of comes in. And then the mind, if you sit with it and believe this fact, comes filter into the subconscious. And if your subconscious believes it, it's, gets really dangerous. And then that's how some people, unfortunately, might make a plan to hurt themselves. Yeah. But he was like, gosh, the idea of this mind is very unique, and didn't understand it. And it's helpful to use, we call it CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which I'm not a huge fan on, but to introduce the mind, it's helpful. And it's the same thing that we're just talking about, that thoughts aren't all real, and we can't believe everything we think. And thoughts are part of the mind, the conscious mind. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I mean, it does. I guess what I kind of distill it to is like, if you aren't mindful, you can get swept up in your thoughts. And your thoughts can then become real.
Yeah,
they can then become your identity.
Yeah.
They can then become your reality surrounding you, because your thoughts equal your emotions, which equals your actions, which equals your habits, which equals your character, which equals your life situation, as Eckhart Tolle would say, or Tolle, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. He wrote The Power of Now, which really kind of blew my mind, but literally blew my mind. But I think it's interesting, because you don't have to accept these thoughts. You can accept the empowering beliefs. Like, I did a talk the other night about there's 5 reasons why real estate investors fail to scale. And I believe this is the case, with most businesses. And it starts with a limiting belief. Like, I can't do this because I don't have enough money. I don't have enough connections. I don't know enough people. The market's really competitive, or the market's terrible, or the economy is horrible. And so, like, if those are your thoughts, like, okay, well, you get to own them if you really want them. Or you can say, wait a minute, that's a limiting belief. Or anything like, I can't travel the world because I don't have money, or I don't know how to do that, or whatever it is. It's like, do you want that to be a reality? Because you can if you choose to.
Exactly. And people are oblivious to that. Like I say, those thought trains, we can get on them when we're just taking for a ride. We're not the conductor. Yeah. And so one things they really do is what you're talking about. Those false beliefs can filter into the subconscious and can keep us in trances that are very negative. So negative trance. And so by definitions, we're actually then hypnotized by the negative beliefs, the false beliefs. And so that, think of us being hypnotized all throughout our day, or we can be hypnotized from a thought, in a belief, through hours. And, some people can go through life, hypnotized in a negative trance.
So you've talked to me about this before on trances, and you say that human beings are in trances multiple times a day.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think anyone can relate when you're driving in a car and I don't remember the last few minutes of that drive. Your definition, you're in a trance. You're kind of mildly hypnotized, and that's just the way I understand the subconscious coming out and the conscious mind taking a back seat, and then you kind of snap out of it. We call that kind of destabilized. You're destabilized, and so a client could come into my office and sit down. Actually, one did today, and it's like, "Gosh, angry at this. I'm angry at that. I'm angry at this. I'm all angry," and he's just in a trance, and he's just saying all this, feeling all this. And he's in the negative one, he's hypnotized from it. So what we do is destabilize it and get him out of it. So he just woke up.
Pattern interrupts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then we move in and say, let's get into a positive trance. But you have to have a conversation with the subconscious to make sure that works right.
That's why one of my kind of mantras is to guard the gates of your mind.
Yeah.
Because it's the most fertile ground in the universe, right? Anything that's planted into your mind will become. So if it's negative, if it's anger, if it's all these different things, that will fester and it will become your reality. And so if you can guard that, if you can say, hey, you know what, wait a minute, I didn't allow you to come in. I didn't allow that negative information to come in, but I am consciously, I'm using my prefrontal cortex to plant in information or, empowering beliefs or empathy or whatever it is. So then, okay, now I can go out and be who I really want to be. So you can use your conscious mind to then leverage your subconscious mind to then create the trances that you want, is essentially what
exactly. Yeah. It's kind of like sports. There's different sports and there's so many different ways to do it. And there's no wrong way. In therapy, because you want it to happen quick, sometimes we use trances. So we hypnotize some clients and to get to the subconscious right away. And so, one client, another one I saw today, is having a false belief of fear that is really, really inhibiting her from having a healthy relationship and kind of moving forward with her life. And one thing we do, you kind of get them in a trance, and that's where, you're really relaxed and you're in kind of a rhythm and you're allowing the subconscious, so they're visualizing things. But then we have them picture themselves kind of in a room, kind of like this, and they're all seeing this in their mind. And we have a TV screen, and we say, "Can your subconscious speak to us? Yes or no?" And yes or no will pop on the screen, and it's really wild. And then can we say, we appreciate the subconscious. You're there to protect us. Thank you for protecting us. Can we let go of the fear right now? And yes or no will pop up. And if no pops up, that's great, because the resistance is a great thing to work with. But sometimes it's yes. And it literally, if they're in a deep trance, let's go. And they don't have that same fear leaving. And it's pretty powerful.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I'll say one other thing. Another trance you do is, and it's very strange. People are listening or thinks it's witchcraft or it's all fake, but it's evidence-based too, is that you put in a trance, you're going through a time machine and you're setting the time machine anytime in the future to meet your future self. And you see your future self, and it's a vision of what your subconscious sees it. And your subconscious will do everything it can to try to put you in that position wherever you set that time machine in the future, whether it's good or bad. And if it's bad, we want to change it. If it's good, let's work with it. And then you have a conversation with that future self. And I always tell people when they're in the trance, ask yourself one question and listen to the response. And then you embrace and you say goodbye and you come back to here now in my office. And the responses and the questions they ask their future self are just incredible. It's like one of the most rewarding things I do.
So give me an example. What's one question that you've seen recently?
So yesterday.
Can't make this up either.
Yeah, yesterday I was working with a woman who's going through postpartum and really bad relationship stuff. She's kind of being traumatized by her family and shamed. It's just so overwhelming. And she thinks she's a failure. She doesn't have any hope. She's hopeless. And so really, really in a negative trance. And the most unfortunate, she was at this great school, PhD, and then had a child with her boyfriend she's having trouble with. And now she's lost some meaning in her life because she was at PhD program. She dropped out to do it. So it's really tough. So she went in to meet her future self. And while she's in the trance, it's the first time I've seen it, she was kind of getting teary-eyed. So it was powerful. And she saw herself, I can't remember how many years, but she was successful, happy, a mother, doing all these great things around the house. And she hugged her future self and asked it, how did I make it through all this? And her future self said, it just takes time. And so she came back to here and now and was just overwhelmed and said, gosh, now I have hope. I kind of know that this isn't going to get better overnight, but just hearing that it takes time and that my subconscious sees this and I have this future self I'm going to build up to makes me feel better. And so that was an example of it. And sometimes the answers are even more concrete and not so open, like it just takes time. Some of them are very specific and it's kind of what they need to hear. And that's why I always tell you is that when we give each other advice, or if you give someone an advice, it's more beneficial for you giving it to the person hearing it because your subconscious you're coming out through there a little bit.
And when you talk, you sort out your thoughts that may have not been conscious before.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's amazing. That's why I always say teach this to someone else because that's how you really learn. That's how you really anchor your understanding. And we're both learning right now. I know I am as I talk. And the first
I learn from you all the time.
One of the things that you mentioned before is like, oh, it might sound like witchcraft and all this stuff, and it does to some people, and some people are like, you know what, I can't play the rest of this podcast. Like, I don't want to hear it. This is crazy. Like, I just want to know how I can find more deals or how I can make more money or whatever it may be. And that's fine because the people who've stuck around are the ones who are committed. They're committed to doing whatever it takes. And this is really how you create anything you want in your life.
Yeah.
And there's science behind it. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if you've studied anything that Dr. Joe Dispenza has done, but he's a neuroscientist and he talks about like literally there's the physiology behind like your subconscious mind, like the brain waves. Like, you're normally in the alpha brain, or it might be beta or whatever. Brain waves.
I'm more alpha, you're more beta.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. You're more the mud, you're more the run of the litter here. But anyway, so you're there normally. It's like your executive brain function. But if you can, get to a lower brainwave state and you can go lower and lower and lower, you can really start to implant the things that you want, kind of within your own mindset. I'm probably getting into deep water with this,
great.
But also, I mean, like you can also, when you were talking a little bit about kind of visualizing your future self, like with your clients, it's like, wow, the client, the wisdom that came from just being in this brainwave state, the physiology of that, and then speaking back to them and realizing that. But then also, there's another book I read called Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. And what he talked about is like visualizing your future self. And like, when you have a goal and you want to like really make that happen, your brain doesn't know the difference between visualizing it and actually experiencing it. So then when it has the opportunity to capture that opportunity, it's already been there.
Yeah.
And it creates it and it sorts out all these ways to coalesce to make things happen.
Yeah.
I mean, is that anything that like you would kind of tie in sort of your perspective with that perspective in any way?
Oh, very much so. And I just want to, so I know I'm kind of cutting short your answer, but I just want to speak to you and what you just brought up about the people who may turn this podcast up. There's so much that I admire about you. And I think I tell you a lot. The one thing that Tyler, you do really well is have this curiosity and humbleness to keep growing and learning in ways that maybe you don't. And because it's so easy and it's easier to maybe like listen to this. And some people think, gosh, that's witchcraft. That doesn't make sense, even though it's evidence-based. So people listening, I hope that they say, this is evidence-based again, that if you do these things like mindfulness that we talk about, it opens up so many doors and you're your best self. It's kind of like if I go to the gym, if I stretch or do yoga, I want to use my body at its maximum potential. And if you incorporate these things that neuroscience is finding, operate your brain and your mind at maximum potential. And just because it's not a way you thought it was going to be, like the trance stuff, well, that's on you to say, okay, then I'm not going to be my best self because of that false belief, that thought. And you, I've seen, don't have that. If something is strange or anything, you don't have these avenues that close those doors to grow. You'll open any door, uncover any rock to say, okay, is this a possible way to better myself? And you don't have any sort of judgments or preconceived notions that that's crazy, that won't work, or stubbornness. It's, no, I'm going to do this. And that's probably why you're successful and going to continue to grow.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I just want to make a quick mention. It's about identifying and applying. And like the reason why I say, hey, we're going to identify and apply how the best raise the bar personally and professionally in real estate and beyond is because, it's about finding something and saying, all right, does this work? Let's test it out. I'm the type of guy who's like, I want to see the evidence.
Yeah.
I want to see the studies. I want to see the reality. And then let me find out if that reality also matches for me.
Right.
Because I talked to a lot of people about like, hey, nutrition and all these kind of things. And there's so many like diets out there, right? And not everything works for everybody. Everybody's body is different. Right. Everybody's body responds differently. But a lot of this stuff that we're talking about is universal and human beings.
Very much so.
If you can apply it to your own life, give it some time. I would say give it, 6 months or a year and wait till you see these these synchronicities start to show up in your life when you start to really believe this and surrender to the fact that anything is possible if you can, work on yourself on a daily basis. That's why it's about personal growth. It's about this journey of like, life does not have to be suffering.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I'm obsessed with it, because not only do I want it in my own life and the people that I love, but I want to give it to millions and millions of other people.
Yeah. And while I was telling you that, I was thinking of like Al Davis of the Oakland Raiders, because here's to someone that was an amazing owner, maybe for his time, one of the best. And then if I'm not mistaken, had this kind of contemptuous view. It's like, okay, I'm going to kind of manage the team. So I was owner, and I'm going to come in and kind of play GM. I'm
going to show you guys.
And then the team really, really failed. And that stubbornness, where it creates walls and short perspective, we can't grow in that.
Yeah,
we really can. And you do a great job with that. So yeah, that's a random story, but that's what I was thinking.
Well, this is a perfect example of how Rob, the empathy. This is like, he values relationships so much, so he always says things like this, which no one else honestly says things like you do. He's not just saying this because we're on a podcast right now. He's saying these things because he recognizes, qualities in other people that are something that he admires, or he sees the good in other people. And I think that's a takeaway for all of us, is to say, what do we see in someone else? And let's tell them now. Yeah. Because one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was like Kobe Bryant. Like and I, we loved Kobe Bryant. And
so we had a relation. Remember at the beginning, I said we have relationships with not just people, he's a person. We never met him, but we had a relationship with it.
Exactly.
And that relationship is real.
Exactly.
Just like to the ocean.
Well, and the reason why I thought about Kobe is because he's, no longer with us, and I'm super sad about it still. I've talked about it like on several podcasts recently, and I wanted to just dive into that with you as well, because of the fact, just for, you got to mention something to someone else that you admire in them, tell them you love them today, and don't wait until later, because tomorrow's not promised. But then also, with that said, like, talk to me about like, why do you think Kobe was like such a why was that so hard for us when he died? Like, what are your thoughts? I mean, just.
Yeah. So I can't speak for you, but for me, it's the same way about how it just really impacted me. So I have had a lot of reflection on why it matters. And to me, growing up, we have MJ. It was funny because Space Jam was on the other night, and, my wife and I were watching it, but, MJ was there, and then Kobe kind of took over.
MJ was both of our heroes.
Yeah,
Michael Jordan was both of our heroes, and then Kobe.
Yeah, but then when we got to a certain level where we're playing high school and stuff, Kobe was the man.
Oh yeah.
And so we mirrored your game after him, and we kind of go outside and you kind of do the Kobe shot.
Oh yeah.
And so it becomes a part of your identity. Here's this person I look up to, and I look up to him in maybe different ways that you do. And that maybe everybody has their different way they look up to Kobe Bryant, but it comes a part of my identity. This is a little bit who I am. Kobe is someone I see and I visualize and I want to kind of mimic. And he just, whether it's in basketball, but he has that Mamba mentality that just you could use in school or work or whatever. And you just see how successful he is, and the grit he has. And so that comes a part of you, and it's like stamped on the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's that person I don't know, but have a relationship with, and then it's gone. And so then you're like, oh my gosh. And because so part of your identity, maybe a very small piece, goes away with it or dies,
Yeah.
or you feel that loss, or you feel that weight. And so that's what I think. But what do you think?
I mean, I thought it was like one of the things that really came to mind for me was that, it felt like a little bit of my kind of coming to age,
Mm-hmm.
Died a little bit during that. And it was like, it wasn't something that I was consciously aware of,
Mm-hmm.
but when it happened, it took me a lot. It was a lot of grief, really. I had to go through a lot of grief about this. And like you said, I'd never met the guy, never, we watched him play in person, which was, I was literally talking about it the day before he died, that it was still the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
How many did he drop?
He dropped 39 points. I mean, it was amazing. And it was just like another night, the
Yeah.
star amongst stars. I mean, we were in the Staples Center, and, every star, that you can imagine was there. But, Kobe was just the center of it. I mean, he was the middle of everything. And, the thing was, even with as much talent as he had, he just never gave up. He never was willing to be outworked.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the biggest thing for me was when he retired, he was so it was like his real personality then was coming out. He was so joyful, and he was giving back, and he was having so much fun. He was being so creative. And I was like, man, I just want to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I just want to be who he is and how inspiring he is. And it's just I don't know, man. One of the things, my biggest takeaway is have no regrets and say what you want to say right now, and, do the things that drive you today and leave an impact. I mean, there's millions, if not billions, of people who knew and were deeply affected by the fact that Kobe died. And how many people can you say that about?
Yeah.
Not many.
Yeah, not really.
So do you want your life to count? So, that's why we're trying to do this right now. It's you know what? We may not ever be like a Kobe Bryant from the worldly perspective.
Or
who knows? Maybe we will be. You never know.
Yeah.
But, the whole point is do something today to help somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's how not only is going to create, abundance in your life and the opportunities in your life, but it's going to, it's going to create something forever, So anyway, I wanted to bring it. I know it's super random, but
no, we love Kobe.
Yeah.
We love basketball, and we're competitive, and we're athletes. It's very, very topical.
Why do you think we still love basketball so much? We're 30, we're in our 30s now, and we're ramping up our professional careers in so many different ways. I mean, why do we still love to watch Kentucky Wildcats? Why are we watching those guys now? They're 18 years old, and we're it's about to be March Madness. Come on, why?
Why do you think? That's my therapy. But anyway, so why would I think? It's part of an identity. I think it's the same way. A lot of people say Kentucky basketball is a religion, but it's the same way. It's a meaning-making system.
Yeah,
it's a way to connect us. And remember that our brains and our minds, we need connectivity. We're part of a larger whole, and so it's searching for ways to that. So being a fan of a sports team, we're still passionate about it, is a way to still feel connected.
Yeah,
and still have meaning. We're going to that meaning. We follow the seasons. It's a way to have meetings. That's why I think we're still fans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, this is a perfect transition because I want to talk about identity.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like identity is one of the most important concepts really in anyone's life.
Mm-hmm.
It's what identity do you hold? And it's we were talking about earlier, is the beliefs that you listen to in your mind. Do you hold on to them, or do you let them pass like the clouds?
Right.
So, I mean, do you agree with that? Is identity, I mean, and how also, if the identity is, I'm angry all the time and nothing ever goes my way, or, work hard, it's no pain, no gain,
Mm-hmm.
do you have to own that forever? Is it a hard process to change your identity, or what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think, part of being mindful is reflecting. And so where did my identity come from? Was my identity partly given to me by somebody else? So a lot of people grow up thinking, my parents always told me that, I was a failure. And so do I think my identity as a failure come from my parents, or where does it come from? So there's a reflective aspect to it. But I do think identity changes and is flexible, just like how mindsight says you have to regulate and understand, and then you can shape the mind. The mind can be shaped and is always kind of growing and expanding. So with that, you can have a different identity. Well, what do you think?
Well, I wanted to follow up on one piece of that, because you mentioned how your identity is really shaped from your childhood and your upbringing, and your environment there. So,
and can be shaped on other external factors as we go.
Could you shed a little bit more light on that? Like, what is there a point in time where your identity is more shaped more than others, or is it a collection of your life experiences that's constantly evolving?
Yeah. So from an attachment lens, you get into Freud stuff, but the attachment you have with a mother and a father, or both, creates an identity, a healthy one within a child. And so I keep saying resiliency, and it's a big word, but the biggest thing that builds resiliency is that do I have strong personal close relationships, especially with mother and father. And there's this really cool experience.
So from infancy.
It begins. Yeah. And in that feeling of that attachment never goes away. All the inner child, the inner child that craves attachment never really goes away. So the identity is key. But there's this video that I really recommend people watch. It's on YouTube. It's called the Baby Still Face Experiment. And this mother is playing with this baby, and the baby is responding to the hugs and kisses. And then the scientist says, go to still face. And the mom just kind of does not have any sort of reaction. The baby picks it up really quickly and tries to do anything it can to get some sort of acknowledgement from the mother. So it starts to scream, cry. It starts throwing its toys. It's getting uncomfortable from the stress of the situation, and then kind of shuts down. And then the mom comes back and gets out of still face and starts loving again. And how that baby feels when the mom is closed, that's how we can feel even through adulthood. But it can last a lifetime without some sort of intervention, which is why maybe therapy can be helpful.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I think the biggest thing is just to go back in your own life and try to figure out, like, where are certain beliefs? Where did they originate? Are they real? And did you get kind of hypnotized into a trance over your life to believe and to identify with those beliefs that were planted, within your own subconscious while you were a child? And so, you may not be taking action on a certain goal or a certain, part of your life because of the fact that you don't feel like you're worthy or whatever it may be. Yeah. So digging into your past thing is so important. But, Rob, I want to talk about you now. I want to talk about, like, who is Rob Giltner, the guy who's giving so much. I know it's one of the things that I know for sure is so challenging as to what you do is that, you deal with a lot of heavy stuff. So to be able to kind of like develop that kind of, I would describe it, you may disagree, a little bit of fortitude to be able to go
mind
in.
mapping.
Emotional
intelligence.
Yeah.
What you're doing. Yeah.
So I think you come in with it and you say, all right, well, I don't have to be wrapped up into these emotions, and I don't have to, be dragged into the mud perhaps, but I'm also going to serve these people. So like the question that I'm trying to get to is, like, are there habits that you've consciously created in your own life to be able to serve people in this state?
Yeah. And first I'd say it's easy not to be like the doing, but to stay in that place of sitting with all the heaviness, because someone told me that a therapist, you kind of see the worst in people, and that's partly true, but the other part is you see the best in people too, because whether it's couples where you see high conflict and negativity to healing and love, or healing and love just individually and change, that is when the best comes out. And that right there, like, energizes me so much, and I love it and crave it.
So you're like the outcome, the outcome is worth going through that.
Yeah. Or like the growth and
growth.
And as a therapist, you're empathetic and you're sitting with the pain, and maybe sometimes, holding it for the client. But it's done in a sense of, I know this is going to heal and change and grow. So it's like gives you dad strength. Or I'm gonna lift this car up with my son because, whatever happens, I don't know. But yeah, so that is one thing that makes it very, very easy. But some things that I do to make sure I don't go home with that baggage is have some sort of retainer. So how can I create a way that I retain things at the office? And so one thing that I do immediately when I get home is change clothes and actually feel the weight of all the clients' pain, stressors, whatever it is, go away. And my wife will say, if I keep my clothes on, I'm kind of in a trance and just sitting with all the stew of the client stuff. And she can tell a difference in my behavior. And she'll go, oh, you got to go change clothes. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And I come down and I'm a new person. So in some way, how can you, retain or put, have something to either keep it at the office or keep two separate worlds separate?
That's really interesting. Like you almost compartmentalize that type of your life.
Yeah.
By just the physiological, like what's on your body.
Yeah, exactly. And I think really maybe you can relate to this, is that someone who might only see me on the weekends and say, you're a therapist? I could never believe that. And then someone who just sees me being a therapist can be like, how do you have fun? It's just very different because I have those boundaries and I keep that. And that's key. So maybe it is, like you said, compartmentalizing a little bit.
What's the most worthwhile investment you've made in yourself over the past few years?
The most worthwhile is into the people around me, like you.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be money. I mean,
I'm saying to maintain friendships and relationships. Again, maybe not just with people, but maybe with nature and maybe with water, maybe with a higher power, maybe with music, all those type of things to maintain those relationships, because other people and other things, those relationships hold me up. And time is an investment. You can spend time, building clients and seeing clients, spend time doing notes, spend time with you. And that is my biggest investment. Yeah. And it gets harder as we go because, life gets crazy, but that's because you're a part of who I've become. And so are all these other different figures that I have. And without that, then I wouldn't be here right now. Definitely wouldn't be on the Elevate podcast. But
I mean, these are all great reminders for us all, is like while we're striving, while we're creating, while we're, doing whatever it takes to develop the appropriate identity or become the greatest version of ourselves, or, develop our own emotional intelligence, our own compassion, for ourselves, but while also remembering, hey, who else has really supported me? Who else has really, believed in me? And who else do I have fun with? Like that's one thing, like you always remind me of. It's like, what, we have to have fun too.
We gotta play.
Yeah.
We're still, we have the inner child. I know that's a cliche, but we have to play. Yeah. And I think we play well.
No, we do play well. We do play well. But what type of play? I mean, what other play is important in your life?
That's a good question. So I think, being goofy and laughing and being silly
feels good.
It does. And some people take themselves too seriously, but maybe it's not a type of play, but it's something that I incorporate, and I hope that people listening work to incorporate. It's another investment. It's just engaging in compassion, and compassion for yourself and compassion for those around us, because we are all connected. And the brain craves that compassion, and it craves the empathy when receiving it. So that's another kind of big investment. But I know that's not a play, but what are ways? I'm curious to know which ways you play.
Well, some of the ways that I play are by hanging out with you, for sure. Because here's the thing, like we can have these deep conversations and these like profound, like world changing, which we believe could be world changing type of thoughts. And like, I truly believe that in my soul, that the stuff that we talk about is, but then at the same time, like we can totally go like the other end of the spectrum and just like be ridiculous. And sometimes like you just need that outlet. And like, I appreciate that. And just bouncing around. I mean, honestly, like I don't think I have enough fun in my life right now. I need to do more.
I don't think we all do. Yeah.
So like, so if we were to brainstorm and say, what other fun things could we do in our life? What would that be?
I think it'd be different for everybody. Because maybe what's fun for me, Like I'm not.
I love traveling.
Yeah, traveling is a big
Yeah.
one. You know, someone may be listening and think, "Gosh, I love playing like some video game," and I don't think that's not our feel. But
Honestly, just sorry to cut you off. I have fun in these type of
Yeah.
conversations.
Mhm.
Like this to me is like really fun.
Yeah.
Like this is honestly one of the most fun things I do. So anyway.
yeah, and I think we're both competitive, so doing things that it's like a competition is fun.
Oh,
and
yeah.
some people, hey, that's not for them, and
That's
we're gonna
true.
have compassion and say, yeah, that's okay if you
Mhm.
don't. But we have competition. I think it's fun to have competition with yourself, and
Competition with yourself. That's a good one.
Mhm.
That's one that I think actually like that's why I love personal growth is because it's not against anybody else. Like
Yeah.
I'm not trying to. I was talking to somebody else today about this. Is like social media. You're comparing yourself to
Yeah.
everyone else,
Yeah, terrible.
and that is a dangerous game to play.
Very much.
But the most empowering game, in my opinion, is to just be better than you were yesterday.
Yeah.
And just try to improve. And you know what? There's days where you're going to slide back. You're going to fall back. You're not going to be perfect in every way. But I love the competitiveness with yourself.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I had someone I really respected told me to tell me this week that, or to share the negative effects of competition, and there
wow.
are. So there's
Yeah.
unhealthy competition and competition, but she just shared the unhealthy, and it's true. You know, it can create fear, it can create this terrible relationship with failure, because we have to have a good relationship with failure. But the whole time she was thinking about saying these negative effects, I'm thinking of the positive things that competition can do.
Yeah.
Because sometimes competition can create a trigger for people who competition has traumatized them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it can be bad or good, but I think we're talking about the good that competition can do. And yes, with the self, if you're competitive with yourself, but also doing it in a gentle, compassionate way, I think you have a higher ceiling than those who don't.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's like anything. You can look at something and say, this is the worst thing ever. Like, money's the root of all evil.
Yeah.
Like one example of like, oh, money's the root of all evil. Or you could say, money gives you an opportunity to give back to other people,
Yeah.
or it gives you an opportunity to create impact, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's an example of that. But like competition, yeah, you can use performance enhancing drugs to
Right.
be the number one competitor.
You can be depressed if you don't reach your goals. And
Yeah,
stay in depression.
exactly.
Yeah.
Or you can say, you know what? I'm going to have the Mamba mentality.
Mhm.
And while I may have some talent, I'm going to act like I'm the 12th man on the bench, and I'm going to get the best out of myself every single day.
Mhm.
And I'm going to leave it all out there. I'm going to become the best that I possibly can. And I'm going to be proud. At the same time, I'm going to be, I'm going to be striving for more, but I'm also going to be blissfully, dissatisfied.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy and I'm present, but I'm also striving for more.
Yeah, exactly.
You know
it's wild.
What?
I remember reading this because we had the Olympics coming up, the Summer Olympics
Yes.
coming up this summer, and it was either the last one or the Winter Olympics. Say that Olympic athletes go through real bad depression after the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just wild because here's your whole meaning making system. You're building up to this one thing and then it's over. And it's like, well, what now? And I have a client, I work with some athletes sometimes, a client who's, that happens to him after these type of meets. And it's just wild. So that maybe is a negative thing.
Well, that's actually a great reminder of the fact that like, there's also professionals like in business or anything, whether you're competing in business or you're competing in sports or so many other capacities, when you do accomplish your goal, I've seen other people become depressed because it's like, wait, I've been working for this for so long and now I got it and this is it. That's all there is. So like, number one, there's a spiritual aspect to business that you have to connect with before you become that person. Number two, you always have to have another goal. You always have to have something else to strive for, because I think the process is, 90% of what you want. It's like becoming more and like going through the challenges and overcoming. It's like, that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
And creating meaning from that rather than just the outcome is so important. But that's a really, you see that a lot with the depression.
Well, I think people look at you and say like, okay, you're talking about the becoming more, and maybe it's competitions, maybe it's not, but what would you say has kind of lit the fire for you to accomplish all what you have and to keep going?
That's a good question. I definitely, first of all, I've not achieved nearly that much. So I appreciate you kind of
you should celebrate it.
framing the audience in that way. But no, for sure. I'm definitely, it's like I said, I'm blissfully dissatisfied, but I still want to become more. And I don't know, the question is what drives me, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. What lights the fire? What's the fuel? Because I think everyone has ideas.
Yeah.
I can start this company. I can write this book. I can do this. I can do a podcast. But very few actually follow through.
Yeah. Well, I asked this question to somebody recently, and they were actually on my podcast, and I said, "What's the driving force behind what you do?" And I asked it at times, and this individual said, fear. Really,
wow.
And I thought it was really interesting. It was not expected, but it was fear of the potential of lack of resources. And I do think that drives a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people are driven by, the thorn, so to speak. And I've been there for sure. I've been driven by, the fear of the negative consequences of not taking action, of, not paying my bills or whatever it is. But what I've tried to do, and I've done this through conscious effort and through mentors and other resources and books, is like, I want to be driven by inspiration more than anything. And so that's why the theme of Elevate is to, help millions of people elevate to a life without limits, because I was in the corporate world before and I was having to plug it in every single day. And I have great memories of things that I learned and people that I met through that process. But I also recognize that it was a little bit of a life kind of muffling sort of, endeavor. I feel like I had to sit there and if you left before 5 o'clock, you were extremely frowned upon.
Yeah.
And if you didn't stay until, 6:15, it was like, hey man, you left pretty early. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, I have other life too. Yeah. And I just felt like it was more so time in the saddle than effectiveness. Yeah. And so that really drove me to say, hey, is this all there is? And if this is all there is, first of all, that's depressing. But number two is I don't think this is all that there is. So then I was driven to say, all right, well, what's the other answer for me?
Yeah.
And then once I found it, I'm like, all right, everybody else needs to know about this, because this is not the only way. You don't have to just live this life where you're totally depressed and you have a couple beers in your driveway every night. You're like, all right, well, got to go to bed, got to do the same thing tomorrow. It's man, we're not meant for that. You know what I mean? Not. So that's what I'm driven for. And I've put it outside of myself. I don't just want money or whatever it is. I want to bring everybody else with me. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's why I do what I do. So appreciate you interviewing on my show.
Yeah.
You can tell I drank the Kool-Aid here. So got the Rob Giltner.
Well, if you ever
Kool-Aid.
Need a guest, the host,
if
you're on vacation,
we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. That'd be cool. That'd be cool. So talk to me about, what are you working on now? I mean, what are your intentions now? I know obviously you're impacting so many people with your, with the therapy practice and, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
What are some big things you're excited about now?
So it's funny because when I first started this, when I got my master's, I'm like, gosh, if I can just help one person, that would be it. And then you help one person and you're like, all right, that's great. How do I do more?
Yeah.
So okay, gosh, if I could just get a full caseload and see, this many clients a week, gosh, that would just be great, because I just want to create change or heal, these type of people. And now it's all right, how do I reach a larger audience? So I'm now kind of trying to cook up things like that. I'm not as, you have such a great podcast. That's just not me. So I'm looking at other avenues to do that. So one might be writing. I have this concepts I'm kind of working on developing, and it's called mind food. So brain food, everyone talks about that, but mind food incorporates how the mind craves empathy, and not just from our relationships, but ourselves too, and incorporate some of the neuroscience stuff. So I really want to expand on that and help educate people on the importance of it, because I think as we move in a direction where our culture and society is, empathy is becoming less and less. And actually there was this study I read about in school that college students today are, I think it was between 30 or 40 less empathetic than they are now. And a lot of it can be used through social media and phones and technology. I don't want to sound like an old man, like get off my yard, but you think of a text, like an I'm sorry text this author talked about. If I hurt your feelings in person, I see you might get teary-eyed, you might be upset, and my empathy comes in.
You get teary-eyed a lot.
And
You're a big baby.
I am a big baby. It's okay, it's good to cry. We should cry. I hope you're not shaming.
Wow. Thank you for tuning in. All right.
but my empathy kicks in, or your empathy kicks in. Through a phone, we don't see those nonverbals, or we don't get that data. So we can just say, oh, I'm sorry, put the phone down and go on with their day, so that empathy is not developed. So my hope is to reverse that, because I don't know, one thing that's crazy on like Twitter, I think we're both on, is now we're in this political race and how nasty everyone is on each other's sides. And so, like, political and Democrat, and if you just don't agree, and everyone just votes with the party, and they think otherwise, oh, you're just dumb because you don't believe what I believe. That is just creates less.
Nobody aligns with every single
less and
policy.
less empathy. So my hope is to create this kind of mind food type of thing. And so how can people build that empathy, which we actually crave? So we're starving each other in our own mind with the lack of empathy. So long-winded, but that's what I'm.
So what mind food is it's helping people create digital empathy. Essentially.
Oh, not digital empathy. Take digital out. Okay. I mean, it could be
create empathy through a digital world.
So nothing that really relates to digital. It could be. Okay. But digital is just an example of how we're starving our mind.
Got it.
So the mind needs food.
Yeah.
The food is kind of empathy.
Okay. I love that. Yeah, it really does. And that's something that we'll definitely have a big takeaway from this conversation today is, you have to be empathetic towards yourself and towards others to really live a life that, is something that you can be proud of.
Yeah. So just think, there's 3 R's with the mindset, reflection, relationships, and resiliency.
Relationships. What is it?
Reflection, relationships, and resiliency.
Love it. Okay. Why is personal growth important to you?
If you're not moving forward, you're not growing, then for my situation, then I can't help others. And there's nothing more frustrating for me being with a client and feeling stuck, or that I don't know what to do, or like feel helpless. And that's where I get really pissed off.
We're still going.
So that's kind of way I would drive. Yeah, that was your question, right?
Yeah. Sorry,
the screen went crazy. And
we're working on some technical.
Got your nudie pictures on here showing up.
No, I totally agree with that, though. It's like there's times where I feel like, man, I could be so much better at this situation. And it's like, man, I really screwed up there. And it does drive me, from a little bit of that lack, but then also it's like I have to remember, all right, don't worry about it. Everybody has to start somewhere in whatever capacity it is. So let's work towards that inspiration and visualize, hey, well, you know what? The next time I'm in that situation, I'm going to be able to serve my client in a better perspective, or whatever it is. I mean, so anyway, I just wanted to stack on top of what you mentioned there for personal growth. So what would you say overall? And again, I asked this to someone else and they mentioned fear, but I'd love to know, what's the driving force behind what you do?
So I think it's love and care, because I know how energized I get from being around you and being around all the relationships I have, and I want that for people. And so that is the thing that inspires or motivates me the most, because when I see people, like whether it's something very obvious, like a couple who their marriage is not fulfilling or the relationship is not fulfilling, that motivates me, because I know what a good relationship does for me. And I want that for them. And I'm like, gosh, please, can I help you get that? And that's that love for them. I don't know if it's love as a word. I guess, well, what would you call it?
I would say it's love.
So yeah, sure. Love.
I would say it's love.
Yeah.
I mean, like emotional intelligence is recognizing that someone else has the same desires in their life, or similar desires, and they just want to be happy. They just want to be, fulfilled. They want to grow. And like what Tony Robbins talks about is like the 6 human needs, right? Certainty, uncertainty, love and connection, growth, whatever. And I'm missing 2. I can't think of them off the top of my head right now, but
I've been talking for 6 hours.
Yeah, exactly. we all have these needs. And so what I'm hearing you say is that that other people have it within them, the capacity to do that, but they're just missing some information, some tactics, some emotions, some physiology,
abilities.
some neurology. Yeah.
That's what I want to talk. One thing that Gottman stuff points out is that love is not just a feeling, it's an ability. And like some people are naturally born, have the ability, let's say, to paint and a great artist, while others, like for me, I got to go to class after class after class. I don't have that ability, but you can build it up. You can work with, like you talk about. So let's call it love. Because I had a kind of a mentor or supervisor once tell me a long time ago that if he didn't have anything he liked about a client, then he would have to refer the client out. And so I think I love all my clients, and I love you, love the people listening. There's always things to love about people. So let's go with love.
Yeah. There's always something, there's like, this reminds me of like gratitude as an example. There's always something to be grateful for, and there's always a good quality within you. Even if you don't recognize it, like within someone else, it's like, man, the guy who flicked you off, right? It's like, I'm sure that guy is not that much of a jerk. Like, I'm sure he's not always just hating on people, right? Maybe. I mean, maybe I don't know.
He could have a personality disorder, which he is always that way, but there's still passion for.
There's pain there that's brought out on you, but that was brought out from someone else. That, you know, where did that stem from? Was it Adam and Eve when they ate the wrong apple?
From Tyler who bullied him as a
maybe. No, I've always.
You're a good boy.
Yeah. But no, it just reminds me of the gratitude thing, because like once you start to recognize like one good thing, it's like, oh well, yeah, like it's nice that we have a roof over our head right now, and man, you know what? It's kind of nice we have carpet in here. It's not like hard on our feet.
It's really nice carpet.
Nice that we have clothes. It's nice that we have technology to communicate to other people. We have water to drink, and then you start. It's like, you know what, Rob? He's not a very good looking guy, but he's nice.
Voice for radio. Yeah. What's it? Looks for radio.
You have looks for radio.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So is there any other questions you want to ask me or you want to go through before we go into our rapid fire section?
Let's see. So when you look at your relationships, let's say the concept of not just people, your relationships with career, the things that give you energy, how would you grade how you are manifesting those relationships?
So like from a scale of 1 to 10?
Or any scale or grade you want. And maybe this is too much information for them.
No, I mean, honestly, one of the things that I've done in the past is like the wheel of life. And so if anybody's familiar with the wheel of life, it's, so picture like a circle, right? And you have all these different spokes on the circle. And one of the spokes kind of like branches out to like a triangle. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the triangle here, and then you've got like another triangle, and it goes all the way around to a wheel.
Like a pie chart?
Yeah, it's like a pie chart, and it's like all these different, it's like a pizza pie, right? Yeah. And you can see them all, they're all cut up. And so you have,
Say pizza?
So, if you can't tell, we're getting hungry at this point. No, so yeah, we didn't bring any pizza in for you, Rob. Rob would throw down on about 3 or 4 pies right now. I can see it. I can literally see it in his eyes.
See it?
Anyway, so the wheel of life, you know, it's really about the different areas of your life, whether it's your health and fitness, your nutrition, your friendships, your friend relationships, your career, your finances. I'm trying to think of the others. Your spirituality is one. You know, your fun, kind of your recreation, and all of that. I think there might be one more category that I'm missing, but I remember doing this process and like, all right, so you rank yourself 1 to 10 in each category. And I remember when I did this first, it was probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, something like that. And I went through this process and I ranked myself high on, you know, my career and my finances and, you know, some of those things. And also like, for the most part, like my health and fitness, but then like my nutrition needed work. Like I was like, you know, probably like a 5 or 6 out of 10. And then like my personal friendships needed work. Like, cause I was like spending so much time in my career that I was sacrificing that. And so like the way that it kind of shook out was that like, there were some areas that were really high, like I would be like an 8 or a 9 or a 7. And then there was others that were really low. And like at the time, like my spirituality was fairly low. And so then so the concept is, all right, if the wheel is off balance, like how smooth is that car ride going to be?
Yeah.
Right. And so once you recognize the fact that like, wow, your spirituality is like super low, and yeah, it's great, your finances are in good shape, but like, how long is that going to last, and that kind of stuff. And so like, I don't know if that answers the question at all, but like it helps me kind of look at like, all right, well, you're never going to be in full balance, because like right now we're doing this podcast, and like, yeah, there's probably 10 or 15 other things that are demanding our attention. Like, you know what, we could be spending time with our family, right? We could be praying or whatever it is. And, you know, or we could be, you know, getting exercise, working out, or whatever it may be. So you're never going to be in full balance, but recognizing that at any one time you can be pushing one thing forward. You can be present with this relationship, where you can be whatever it may be. So like, that was a good illustration for me on relationships with different areas of my life. And, you know, I think the core is having a good relationship with myself.
Amen. I was going to say that's key.
That's it.
Because I think we can all have a time where we say, you know, or I asked, and I think we can all picture a time, was there a time where you're more close with yourself or had a better relationship with yourself, and maybe a time when you didn't feel like you had a close relationship?
Yeah.
I think we all can come up with a time. But I really like how you brought up, there's also a relationship with money, and that can be healthy and unhealthy. I like that pie chart. That's real good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can put a link in the show notes of that, because that's there's a lot of right there. Whatever. I can put that in there, because it was super helpful for me. And if anybody wants to reach out and talk more about that, we can definitely do that. But it's important to think about all of these things, and this is really how you create the life that you want now, as well as what you want in the future, and how you create, you know, something for other people. And so, you know, with that said, I want to do our lightning fire round. It's our rapid fire.
Fire it up.
It is the rare air questionnaire, because most people gave up. Most people, you know, their mind told them that they were something, and they believed it, and they said, forget it. I'm never going to be anything more than, you know, just what my mind tells me I am. They weren't able to separate from that. But we didn't. We continue to push through. And we also continue to inspire others that the reality is they don't have to do that either. They can actually join us at the top of this peak, and we can go to the next one. So that's the whole point behind this. But if you were to say, you know, we've talked about a lot of John Gottman's work, a lot of Daniel Siegel's work, Siegel's work, and others. Would you point to one or two books that you've read that have been super impactful for you?
Gosh, there's been so many. So the most important thing are the authors. And coming back is that it's, you know, I love the science, whether it's neuroscience or how, you know, the Gottmans point out with their love lab. So anything that is backed by science, I really appreciate. Mindsight, which we already talked about, the Siegel book, is a great introductory way. He also has another book that's for mindfulness, the Mindful Therapist, but it could be used not just for therapy. Gottmans are super helpful. I'm actually rereading this book now just because we asked. It's the 8-week mindfulness handbook to cope with stress, and I forgot the title somewhere in here. It's in there.
Yeah.
But you can just search 8-week mindfulness thing, you'll find it.
I mean, a book that you turned me on to several years ago was like my introduction to mindfulness, was Mindfulness for Beginners by John Kabat-Zinn. So if anybody wants to, you know, get a more of a deep understanding of mindfulness from a very baseline perspective, I would recommend that. And that was a book that Rob recommended to me, and he's recommended many others, but definitely appreciate you sharing that. So we've talked about obviously so many things today, and I'd love to know if there was one thing that you could point to in terms of how you elevate your life on a daily basis, what would that be?
Elevate my life on a daily basis. Through meditation, mindfulness, showing gratitude and compassion to myself, the things I do, and things around me that are living, maybe non-living.
Love that. That's not an easy one there too, right? It's like even non-living, like how do you do that?
So, you know, it's a form of mindfulness. Like when I'll step out of here, you know, I don't know, it's 5:30, the sun, the sun might be going down or maybe cloudy, but just looking up and appreciating to very little details what nature has provided. So if it's, you know, cloudy day, the beauty that clouds bring, or if the sun's peeking through, the beauty that does, and just very, very acknowledge it. if I wasn't mindful, or maybe before I started doing this, I would just walk outside, be oblivious, get into my car, drive home, and I wouldn't have any of that gratitude for the non-living things. And we actually learn through this stuff. That's like little vitamins for the brain. And the brain wants that type of gratitude for the things around us.
Love it.
Yeah.
So beyond what you do as a professional, what's the biggest way that you elevate others around you?
Gosh, so outside of being a therapist?
Yeah.
So, wow, that's
a tough one.
That is a tough one.
I mean, come on, dude. It's not going to be easy.
No, because it's easy to answer that question and say, yeah, well, I do therapy with them.
I charge them ungodly. I mean, this guy's ridiculous.
So one thing, I guess you kind of already mentioned, I like being the cheerleader because I can see good in you and our friends. Where there's a lot to see, and help build that up and kind of be the cheerleader. So I kind of can get the skirt on and the pom poms and elevate people that way.
I love that question in particular because we can all implement that into our own life. Like, okay, you're naturally great at that. You're naturally at recognizing the skills and the talents and unique abilities in other people, but we can all develop that, and I think it's really cool. It's really admirable what you do with that. And so hopefully I'm practicing that right now. Yeah. So any parting thoughts or words of wisdom for Elevate Nation?
Yeah. And this is just biased because what I do, but there's a lot of negative, for some, especially men, thoughts on therapy, but therapists and therapy means there's something wrong with us. It can be if I have an illness, I go to the doctor, it can, but we can use it as we use the gym. So we kind of have the mental and emotional muscle we're working on. And it's a way to live your best life and be your best self. And if you're ignoring it, well, then that might be a negative behavior you're in that's going to lower your ceiling. So be open to it. Like you said, what you say, you try it and you find evidence. If it works for you, then you keep it up, or if you don't,
identify and apply immediately. Apply immediately, see what happens for you. You have to give it some time. It can't just be I went to a therapist one time, it didn't work, so I'm out.
Let me say that. So also, if you do go, therapist shop, because like any profession, there's good ones and there are bad ones, and the bad ones piss me off because they ruin it for some other people. So know that you can therapist shop, and the most important thing is the therapeutic alliance. What that means is how well you get along with your therapist, and that's one of the most important things.
Yeah, that's really important. And of course, not any profession is going to be 100% success rate, but you've got to take time to investigate. And then also something that I think is so important is do you align energetically with this person?
Right.
Does your gut say, this is the right fit? If it doesn't, maybe there's some infinite intelligence that's telling you something that you're not consciously aware of. So I really, really appreciate that. And
I'll say one more thing. Early detection is key, individually, but most importantly for relationally. So with systems, so families and couples come to couples therapy when it's too late, a lot of the times. So early detection, if you can swallow the pride, or you think it's going to be uncomfortable because we're just going to fight, get all that rid of it. Early detection is key with relational stuffs and individuals. So the earlier you get in, the more likely you are to not have to, need therapy anymore, because you have the resiliency and you have these things that keep away problems that might happen in the future with your relationships. So early detection is key.
Well, that's another great comment on if you identify any challenge in your life, whether it's in a relationship or otherwise, you should face it. Yeah. Go ahead and face it now, because it's just going to get bigger and bigger later. It's going to be much more resolvable later.
You avoid it, and now you swept it under the rug. Yeah. You come to my office and it's like, gosh, we're so messy.
Yeah. So, sit down and do your kind of wheel of life and identify where are you struggling? Do you need help with your relationships?
Yeah. And ask for help. It's okay to get help. I come to you, we had that that dinner the other day. It was a while ago. Came to you and asked you your advice. Or was it lunch? We went to lunch one day. Yeah. Remember that?
It was lunch, you idiot. It wasn't dinner.
Ask for help.
Don't ever make a mistake.
It's okay to ask for help. But
absolutely. No, it's definitely okay to ask for help. And you should be investing your own time, your own resources into furthering yourself and furthering your relationships. So I highly encourage you to get engaged with Rob and get engaged with what he does, and So Rob, with that said, is there what's the best way for Elevate Nation to kind of become engaged with you and learn more about what you do?
So they can go to my website, robgiltner.com. They can go to the Louisville Mindfulness Center.com and reach out or schedule appointments through there as well. That's the best way. And I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate y'all listening. And if there's nothing else we talk about, make sure if you're listening that you do something you want to do today.
Do something you want to do today.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. It's a reminder that we all need, and I needed it maybe.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. And I definitely want to encourage you to reach out to Rob and stay engaged with him. And that's ROBGILTNER.com. So you can reach out there. You can also find him on Instagram, Rob Giltner, Louisville Mindfulness Center. And we can put all these links in the show notes. So I just want to encourage you to re-listen. I know this was a little bit of a unique format today. We did a long form and we went deep, and we were going off, on a little bit of tangents here, but I think there's a ton of deep wisdom here. So I would highly encourage you to re-listen to the show, take notes, and engage with us. I mean, if you have additional questions or things that you want to talk about, please reach out to Rob or myself, and we'd be happy to connect you where appropriate. And then also, I would encourage you to share this with someone else. Maybe you make a list of what are your top 3 distinctions, and these are things that you can identify and you can apply in your own life currently. And you want to take massive action on that. If you need to engage with a therapist, if you need to have a conversation with your significant other,
if you need a coach,
you need to go out there and invest in that.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be, if you just have to take massive action, because that's the only way to anchor it into your own understanding, but then also teaching it to someone else. Of course, how do you do that? I say this, I've been saying this time and time again, you've got to brainstorm after you've listened to this. What ideas did you infer, right? What things did you learn just by your own wisdom that you bring that we don't have? What third mind was created there? What things can you prioritize in your schedule? Who can you find leverage on? What kind of accountability partner can you find? Execute, course correct. You will make mistakes. You will learn more about yourself. You will gain the feedback of mistakes and some failure, but that's not the end. It's only the beginning. So, screenshot the show, tag Rob, tag Elevate Pod, tag your friend. Who needs to learn about this? But Rob, man, this is a ton of fun.
Appreciate you.
Absolutely, my
Yes,
friend.
sir.
Elevate Nation, we will see you soon. Thank you so much for tuning in.
One love.
This episode of Elevate is brought to you by CF Capital, a real estate investment firm formed by myself and my partner, Brian Flaherty, where we invest in multifamily real estate communities across the Southeast United States. If you'd like to learn more about our approach, our mission, our acquisition criteria, and how you can learn more about future opportunities, visit cfcapllc.com. Again, that's cfcapllc.com.
Thank you for listening to Elevate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to elevate your results by taking immediate action on what you learned. For more, visit tylerchesser.com.